Curiosity time is a time for students to really get a chance to dive deeper into a topic or project that we're doing in class. A chance for them to throw out questions that they maybe have always wondered or just never really had an academically driven topic to focus on.
Like those strings for the piano? Yeah.
How would you describe that question?
How do the strings get involved with the piano?
I'd like you to try to come up with as many questions related to this topic as possible. There's no question that is too off the wall, and there's also no question that's too obvious. The more questions, the better. So for 3 minutes, I'd like you to just do this individually.
The process is really helpful because for our projects we get to answer our own questions that we're curious about, so it helps us deeper understand what we're learning about.
It gives you the opportunity to learn what you want to learn.
This is an important practice because learning needs to be a little bit of a combination of individual curiosity and a collaborative process. And when the teacher is the one that's constantly directing where the class is going, that's only one person's curiosity that's being appeased, maybe the teacher. And so including students to be part of that process not only ensures that they're more engaged and interested in what they're learning, but it also creates more of a community. It kind of shows students that, hey, I care about what you care about. I want to include you in this process.
It's really engaging for us as students, and we're more excited to learn about the project because it's actually coming from us, the things that we're learning about.
Asking good questions is kind of a really important skill in any career. I think one of the biggest hurdles most people have is that they're afraid to ask some of the obvious questions, and so they don't. And so this process kind of builds confidence in students in asking any type of question and giving them the confidence to explore some of the things that they may or may not have been curious about. Even if they are very simple, it still kind of brings their voice to the table, and in most careers that's an extremely important skill to have. For me, I use curiosity time at the start of a project or at the start of a new topic that we're doing, sometimes even midway. It really helps inform me what kids want to learn about. It also helps them feel like they have ownership of the learning, and it helps me plan how I want to best engage that learning or that discovery of some of their questions. So for curiosity time, in my own mind, I have a general direction of where the learning's going to go and the content. So I try to choose a prompt or an image or some kind of starting point for the students to generate their own questions about. Again, guys, questions can be clarifying questions about these statements, or they can be a little bit deeper questions related to these things. Maybe some whys and hows. I gave you some bits of information, but I didn't tell you why that information is information I gave you. So for this example, I know that we're going to be learning more details about not just frequency and sound, but how that's organized into music, especially with the musical scale. So I wanted to give them a little bit of information first about that. I also used vocabulary that I knew most kids wouldn't know to start some of the more basic questions to get the ball rolling. So we used the word like fret, octave, scale, in hopes that some would ask those general, simple questions, but then that they would hopefully then lead into more complex questions. What's really important in beginning curiosity time is allowing space for students to think individually, to have a space where they can write down their own questions, to really value their own individual thoughts. After that, I open it up more to the group so that they can hopefully build off of each other's questions, find some commonality in their own questions, which might validate their own thinking so they become more emboldened to ask more and build off each other. And that's kind of a little bit more of a rapid fire in that questioning, really trying to encourage them to produce quantity of questions and hopes that they end up getting a little bit more out there and pushing each other in their own questions.
Why are octaves important, I guess?
What's a fret?
What's a wait? I want to write it.
Why does a normal piano have 88 keys? Why not like 90 or 80?
Why does a typical piano only have 88 keys?
Does it cost to produce a grand piano? How loud are each of the instruments, and what's the point of this little black area?
Rishi, what's a question that you had?
I had one that was, why are they made in the style that they are?
It's really challenging to work with groups sometimes for me personally. I've always been better at independent work, but it's a good challenge, and I know that I'll have to use that later on, but I'm getting better at it, so yeah.
To me, I feel like it's easier than individual work, but that might just because like I'm a soccer player and I'm used to playing in a team. But group work, it also just helps you understand your classmates and understand the project more because it's more ideas just coming together. Favorite part is just finding out what people think about what your question and then just trying to compare them to like others and your own.
Next, I asked them to think about the types of questions that they asked. So in this example, I was asking them to think about open or closed questions, not to pass judgment on the questions, but more so to make them think about how do we ask questions.
Open means like it has a lot of different answers, and there's like a lot that you need to learn about it to like be able to answer it. And then closed is just like you can look it up and get like a one-sentence answer, like yes or no.
There's a purpose for closed questions and open ones. So I just wanted them at this point in the school year to think about that, especially in a science classroom. That's the first practice in science and engineering practices, is asking questions and defining problems. So it's important to ask those open and those closed, but more so to be able to go back and forth and changing them. So I had them try to choose one open and practice changing it to a closed, and vice versa, so that they can, again, continue to think like scientists. Lastly, I had them prioritize their questions. So I basically said to the students, if they could only get one of these answered in the end of this project, which would it be? Just again, so they have a little bit of ownership in the learning, a little bit of direction of their own in the learning, and help me decide what really they're thinking about.
For our presenting, should we like pick an open one so that we can like learn about it for 2 weeks, or does it matter?
It's kind of whatever your group decides, whatever you're most curious about. If there's one thing you walk away learning by the end of the project, what will it be out of all those?
There's a lot of content that I can go over. Some of it sidetracked, some of it's core into the actual content that they're learning about, but this is school. This is what learning is all about. It should be fun and it should be driven by them. So I want to honor their curiosity in going forward with them.
Our question is, why are there 12 notes in the Western scale?
Our question is, why are there strings on a guitar and keys on a piano?
Ours is, what would a guitar sound like if there was a square hole instead of a circle hole, and like would it change the sound?
Why do others prefer different types of music? And what happens to your brain when you listen to music?
To make this successful, I think it's really important to have a thoughtful prompt that is giving students a direction to go, not giving too much away and not making it too overwhelming. There's a real balance of sparking them to ask questions. So, for example, in this instance, I used some vocab words they hadn't heard before in hopes that at the bare minimum they could ask questions like, what is an octave, what is a scale, those types of things that would hopefully lead to more. I would also say it might be a good idea to practice with a colleague or share a prompt with somebody else, especially somebody who might not be in your same subject area, and see what they come up with. I did the opposite. For this case, I shared it with an expert in my subject area to make sure all the verbiage was right, because I'm not an expert in sound and music. So this was actually a lot of questions I had myself about the topic. So that's an important thing to think about too. If you're curious about something, students might also be very curious about that. I would caution about being too general, though. In the past, when I did this earlier, I had a question to the students rather than a prompt, and I have found that a prompt generates more questions. So my question before was, what does it mean to be human? That produced statements, not questions. This time I gave them a statement and it produced questions. So that's another tip. I would try to think of something that would spark more questions than just statements. I did this with 8th graders. I'm sure if we went down the grades to elementary school or even younger, they would have a lot more off-the-wall questions, but that's kind of what learning is all about. It should be fun. It's funny doing this with younger students because they tend to, once they get the ball rolling and find they're in a safe space, tend to throw out a little bit more out-of-the-box questions. I think us adults are either afraid to take risks in asking questions, or we simply assume we know the answer or assume somebody else knows the answer and we can just ask them right away. But students don't do that much assuming. Once they're engaged, they kind of take the ball and really run with it and really start genuinely asking their questions they're curious about. For me as a teacher personally, again, it really just informs the direction I want to take the class. I really want to value what they had to say, and the different activities and the ways that we're going to learn in the future are going to be based on those questions. I really want them to see their questions in the next lessons that we have, whether it be in Socratic Seminar, whether it be in Genius Time, whether it be in how we approach the end products of our project. I really want them to see their questions in there.